Welcome everybody to Project 180. This is the web series where we do our best to turn your projects around. We talk to experts about their experience and get their advice and pick their brains on all sorts of interesting project management stuff. Today, I'm gonna wave over. Hi, Morgan. We've got Morgan Davies with us from Kingston, Ontario. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon to you as well.
And how you doing today, Morgan?
I'm so well. Sun is
You're
shining.
so well.
So well. Sun is shining. Can't complain.
I appreciate that perspective. I know for anybody who doesn't live in kind of our region of Ontario, I'm in Ottawa and Morgan's in Kingston. We had these horrible thunderstorms yesterday, but it's beautiful now today, so it's great. And I've just got, believe it or not, 2 more people joining, so I'm just letting them in while we're talking. All right, so Morgan, first, can we start a little context on you? Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a bit of a Renaissance woman, so you do a lot of different things. But give us a bit of a heads up on your background.
Yeah, as you said, I do many things. So that question is always the most exciting one because what am I going to say today? What part will I reveal? But I'm Morgan Davies, so I'm a project management student. I'll start with that. So that's where the project starts. A co-founder of a creative collective called Third Space. And I'm also a co-author of a book called The Woman with Three Eyes. And I am a graduate of International Development Studies. But beyond that, I'm a human that loves creativity. I love learning consistently, and I love expanding within community and gathering in enjoyment.
I love that. Thank you very much for such a great intro. I hate to try and do it myself, so I always let people express themselves and share that. So thank you so much for that. I think what's interesting for anybody who's watched or joined one of these sessions before, we've talked to folks. I'm going to point out a couple of them, but like Mark, Emily, and I have years of or a few decades of experience doing PM stuff. But as you say, Morgan, we're still learning. Right, and that's even what really these things are all about is our continued education and learning as well. You're at another end of in terms of your career. You're kind of new to the space, but you have a really interesting background and experience, and that's really what we wanted to kind of dig into a bit with you today. I'm wondering if you could start by telling us a bit more about Third Space, because it's really a really neat project that you're working on and creating these events in the Kingston area. So can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I would love to. So Third Space Creative Collective, it's a very dynamic project. It's a very dynamic project. It truly just began last year, but it began much, much earlier than that in the seed of the vision, the seed of the thought. But Third Space Creative Collective, we've began hosting events in what are called third spaces. So third spaces are those spaces in between work and home, those spaces where there's creativity, where there's oneness, where there's truthful, honest authenticity, where people come as they are and experience something as a collective. It's that in-between space, as we say. So we've been hosting these events with different artists. So you think of vintage clothing vendors, silver jewelry. We think of visual painting, visual artists, DJs. And then we've also hosted panel discussions talking about art and business, which is why it's a very dynamic space. We're doing everything that feeds the soul, that feeds the humanness within us. So we host events, and we're also expanding into the e-commerce space. So every artist we work with has an opportunity to sell and promote their art through our platform.
See, what there's so much I love about that, and because I've a history of being a fine art appreciator and organizing events as well. I've done a lot of that over the years, so I really appreciate what you're doing, and it is so multifaceted. And it's and like you're saying, it's all the things that a human might need outside of work and home. It's a really nice idea, this third space.
Mhm.
And having these, whether it be panel discussions, but more business oriented things, or having, a different kinds of shows and sales and things like that in these spaces really speaks to community building,
Mhm.
which to me sounds that's really part of your focus, is not just creating these interesting things, but also supporting this community and building something new out of it.
Exactly. Exactly. And in this vision, we always go back to that idea of we want a gathering space where the artist and the businessman alike can come back together.
So I guess what kind of environments have you found to be very successful?
Mm,
And actually maybe backpedal that late. How do you determine success? Because that's
mm,
the, we're going to leverage into or move over to PM stuff eventually, but like there's a good starting point. How do you measure success now, and how
mhm,
do you kind of pick things that work best for you?
mhm. In relation to third space, the way we measure success right now is not by numbers. Numbers are nice, yes. Numbers tell a lot, yes, I understand. But the way we
Not a full
measure,
story.
yeah, exactly. So the way we measure our success right now is how does it feel to attend our events? How does it feel to leave our events? So it's going back to that feedback. Um, are people leaving? What are the key words that they're saying? And some of the words we've heard is expansive is a repeated one, energized. They leave expressing so much gratitude for being just present in that space. So the way we measure success right now is based on the experience. Was it memorable? Was it fulfilling? Are you overflowing after you leave this third space? Because that's exactly what it's built for. So success, I think, in every season transforms with the numbers and with the KPIs, but consistently, it's how do you feel when you leave?
I appreciate that very much, because
Mhm.
whenever you're rating anything, like you're saying, the numbers are the easy part. Are you satisfied or not satisfied? And you can check, things. But anyone who is doing any kind of analysis of satisfaction through an experience, whether it's Amazon, or any kind of in-person experience like you're organizing, there's a deeper story there,
Exactly.
and trying to pull some of that knowledge from mind to their hearts to explain what they liked, what they didn't like, is far more informative than just a simple numeric rating, which you can interpret many different ways.
hmm It makes me think of when you visit an art gallery, how do you articulate how you feel when you leave? And that's exactly what the third space is supposed to be. Even if it's a discussion, it's that immersive feeling that you get in an art gallery. The same. Mhm.
So how do we, or how do you? I know you've been in school, you're starting this, you've done a lot of different things, but how do you, or how did you recognize that project management might actually benefit the work that you're doing? Like, what was the genesis of kind of moving into that space
Mm,
in the educational sphere? I mean,
mhm. I think based on my introduction, you can probably tell I like a lot of things. A lot of random side quests is my thing at this chapter in my life. And I realized that I'm a creative person. I think we're all innately creative people, but I naturally don't have the organizational skills that I need for a project to be successful. I have amazing ideas, but to execute them, to follow up with them, to see them come to their full potential requires me to do a lot of work, and that's project management work. Otherwise, I'll start a side quest and get distracted and maybe start something else. But project management is giving me the systems that ensure that I follow the plan. And when you have the plan, the execution then is almost inevitable because you've gone through the risks, you know who you need, you know what you need, you know when you need it, you know why you need it. And so for me, project management, it goes back to the power of scope and keeping the main thing, the main thing. And that's truly why I know that this education, whether I use it down the road or not, is so valuable right now for where I am in my entrepreneurial journey.
I mean, I hate to just be like praising all the time, but what a great realization on your part. Like, I've worked with so many, startup companies and, nonprofits and stuff over the years, and they're founded by somebody who's very passionate about a thing, or a group of people who are very passionate about a thing, and they can build that thing in this chaotic environment, right? They hammer it and it's all random in the garage, and bang, next thing you know, they've got Google, right? And they built this thing. But there's sometimes a lacking of discipline in terms of getting from nothing to something that's just a pure chaotic and pure creativity, like throwing paint at that canvas, right? Seeing how it looks and how it works. But then to scale it and to actually grow it and do things in a consistent way, that's a skill set that I find is often lacking. It's not a judgment on anybody. It's just a matter of, this is not something they've recognized maybe as a need, or something they don't innately have. So interesting to hear you recognize that, in these more, creative endeavors that you're working in, that would be a benefit.
We often talk about, like, what are your blind spots as a leader? And I feel those were mine, and those are mine that I'm working on, is how do I continue with the discipline so that this vision isn't just held in a mental space, but it can actually be manifested into a tangible physical thing. So yeah, you understand.
Well, like in terms of the PM stuff, like, how are you finding implementing this? Because I know you're in school, you're studying it right now, but in terms of actually implementing some of that new knowledge into what you're doing, is it still a lot of improvising, making things up as you go, or are you finding that it's starting to gel and things are coming out a little more formed? Stuff?
Good question. I think it's both. There's definitely a lot of improv happening. There's a lot of moments where I do something based on my known knowledge, my previous experience, and then I'll get through that experience and go, oh, I could have used what I learned, I think. And so it's not until after that I come to that realization. But there are also many moments of stakeholder engagement and following up with some of our artists in our collective that I go, okay, I'm actually rearranging my priorities based on my education right now. So I know what I need to do in the business space, and it doesn't feel as tedious. It doesn't feel as chaotic. And so there are many moments where project management already has given me more clarity in the way that I'm leading and showing up in the third space, truly.
Right. It's interesting you commented on stakeholders. How do you manage relationships? I know you're working in a creative space, and I'm not judging creative people. Like, I'm not saying that, but how do you manage folks who are maybe not on that same wavelength in terms of prioritization and setting milestones and goals? Like, how do you find that you're trying to impose maybe a little bit more structure in what you're doing? How do you find that in terms of your stakeholder relationships and relationships?
That's another good question. Wow, we should have a podcast or something. I feel like in stakeholder engagement, especially in the creative industry, I have to remind myself that as I'm implementing structure, how would I receive leadership as the artist that I am? So what would I need as an artist? And it's difficult. I feel like being an artist, you're very spirit-led, you're very intuitive. You like to go not necessarily running hard at something, but you want to move where the wind is putting you. And it's realizing that you have a balance, and with all of the creatives in our collective, we show up authentically, and we don't try to have this business persona of do this, do this, do this, do this, but rather asking, okay, what are your needs? What are the ways you create? What are some blockages within your creation process? What can we do for you, and what can you do for us? And it's not forcing any tone. It's not forcing any formal meeting, but it's just speaking how you speak in the creative space, and how you speak in the creative space is how you speak as yourself. So the stakeholder engagement process within the creative industry just requires you to know yourself beyond business. It's been an interesting journey. We're still in it. We're finding the systems that work.
Yeah, and when I hear something like, yeah, the secret is kind of knowing yourself, I think that speaks volumes of your kind of emotional intelligence and maturity, because I'm not seeing a lot of that necessarily in a lot of other places. And Mark's giving me a thumbs up there. But it's true. I think and it comes down to any kind of leadership. And you're leading a project, you're leading a team, whether it's a creative endeavor, whether it's you're building a hospital. Like, it doesn't matter what the thing is, to know yourself and your own skills, soft skills, hard skills, and being able to use those, leverage those well, but also be open to everybody else's. That can be a challenge. Like, how many leaders, I mean, I'm not seeing a lot of cameras on, but you wave or give a thumbs up or something if you've ever had a leader who was just a really bad communicator. Right? And it can be a real challenge, because that leads to breakdowns, and that leads to other kinds of things. So oh, sorry, someone just got their hand up. I want to make sure I get the chance to, or if they put their hand back down. I saw briefly that a hand went up, but maybe they changed their mind. Blake, when we met a bit earlier, he has a question in the chat, Morgan. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, your BFFs, you said.
Yes, but just for everyone who's maybe not seeing that, I saw in your profile you're a poet. Is that your primary form of art? Does your process for writing parallel anything you've been learning about related to project management? Good question.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, Blake. That's truly. Poetry is definitely my primary form of creation. It's the space that I go to connect to myself, to connect to my visions, to reflect on the work that I've done and the work that I want to do and the work that I'm doing. And there's so many parallels to project management with poetry. Poetry is the opportunity to draw the landscape of everything around you. So you get to see your visions, you get to see your goals, you get to see your past, your present, your future. And to be a leader requires you to know all of these things. When you're leading a team, what we had Tufik talk to our class not too long ago. He's doing awesome things in the project management space, but he was talking about, as a leader, you have to point to the mountain you want to take your team to. Know the mountain, keep pointing to it so they know it too, and you keep guiding them to it. And there are many mountains around you could go to, but you point to the same one, to the same one, to the same one. And so that clarity only comes with reflection. You don't just get that. You don't wake up and go, oh, I know what I'm doing. You have to take the time in that space of knowing yourself, and removing the things that aren't necessary for that journey. What are you carrying? You don't necessarily need a cup of coffee in your hand all of the time, but you do need your compass. You do need your compass. So it's choosing what's necessary, and intentionally understanding that when you have that vision in mind, you need to take the time in the reflection before you take the next step forward. And so poetry is probably the foundation of everything I do. Now that I think of it, how I talk to people, how I talk to myself, that's a big thing in any entrepreneurial journey. How are you speaking to yourself? Are you telling yourself that this is possible? And understanding, I think, especially in the creative industry, that any business plan is rooted in some form of creativity. And the only way you connect to that creativity is through your form of creation. So I don't know if this answers your question, Blake, but poetry is parallel to, I think, everything I do. in project management.
Great answer. Blake, feel free to unmute and jump in if you'd like any kind of follow-up. And just
No,
a quick story, Blake. I'm asking you to talk and I'm cutting you off, but just a quick reminder to everybody: at any time, please unmute, join in, ask a question. Happy to hear all thoughts and perspectives. But Blake, please go ahead.
I was going to say it was a fantastic answer, and thank you for taking the time to respond to it. But it's fascinating the parallel of art and work. I was in a similar discussion like this, or joined a similar presentation like this, where it was talking about the parallels between art and work. So it's interesting to kind of continue that conversation. But I could tell that the way you speak and the way that you carefully choose words, the poet in you certainly comes through. So I love it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Blake. Truly. In my scope management course, we were actually talking about the parallels of poetry and project management. And we were saying how a project manager needs the poet within them, but they also need the plumber. And I think I'm working on the plumber side of me because I have all of these, so many thoughts happening, but the tangible skills, the plumber, the mechanics of it is, I think, also just as important as the poet within you.
Yeah, I've always found project management is something that's fairly easy to kind of wax about and kind of philosophize about, because it can be anything. It's really this amorphous thing, and you have these various skills that you just kind of try and fit into any given situation. Like any job that I've ever had, whether it was strictly a PM role or something that just I was working on creating a technical document or something, there's still an element of project management around it, and ditto for any creative endeavor. And I think something you spoke to a couple minutes ago also kind of rings true with me, that creating anything is a creative endeavor. It's literally the same root word, right? Like it's if you're building software for the first time, you're still envisioning what that thing is going to look like, how people are going to interact with it. Just like when you're making a painting or a poem or a novel or a movie or whatever it is, you're still creating something that somebody's going to engage with.
Exactly.
But it comes from a space that you were inspired to create this for whatever reason, and maybe your motivation is, I'm going to make $1 billion. Fine, but maybe your motivation is just, I really see a need for this thing and I want to build the thing. So yeah, I don't really see any difference in these spaces, really, in that matter respect. And I think the project management skill set applies across all industries, obviously. But what I find interesting is that sometimes, as Mark's saying, that project management is both art and science. It's true. There's the human element that we've been talking about too. And, in the PMBOK, they talk about communication management and all that stuff. You have to have a communications plan and how you're going to engage with all these different people and gather their input and deal with changes and surprises that pop up along the way, which is a tactical, practical skill set, but it's also just a very human skill set. It's communication. It's being able to understand their needs and being able to express your own needs and maybe reactions that may be in agreement or not with what they want to do. Like, can we try to normalize haikus to replace stoplight status reporting? That's a great idea. Funny story. I'm just inspired to say this, but years ago, I was feeling particularly, I guess, silly or creative, maybe one, and so I decided in all my responses to emails were going to be an iambic pentameter. So I worked very hard. Nobody noticed, was the sad thing. Nobody noticed that I was creating the thing. But I enjoyed doing it at the time. But it was pretty funny. Sorry, one more question.
I'd love to receive every email like that.
It takes work.
Yeah.
And I don't want AI to do it for me, right? So you got to be able to do it yourself. Morgan, question for you, in terms of, has there been something that you've learned, maybe in your project management school or something as you're learning through this process, that has really had kind of an immediate impact. You're like, yes, this is the thing I was missing. This is what's going to help me kind of get through this situation.
That's a big question. I think it goes back to scope. I think the thing that I said before, the keeping the main thing, has been the simplest advice that has truly transformed the work I'm doing. Because I think as a poet naturally, and as a creative naturally, there's a depth that you start to go that it becomes difficult to simplify what you're doing. And I think within the entrepreneurial journey, I've realized that as I'm leading, it doesn't matter if it makes sense to me or if it sounds poetic. Whoever I'm speaking to has to know what I'm saying. What I'm saying. And the work that I'm doing, it can't just be an inner work, but it has to be a space where others can experience themselves through it as well. So the main thing that project management has given me, the most powerful thing so far, is the tools and the space that I get to simplify these complex ideas. And as I'm learning about WBSs and time management skills, I sometimes want to smack my head because that's not how I am naturally. I love to figure it out as I go.
Yeah.
But having it in that visual form, having those systems, and having the refinement process for these complex ideas has been a big shift in everything I'm doing.
That's interesting. Like talking about the work breakdown structure. Like, don't worry, but nobody naturally thinks of it like that. That is not something that just like you're born. Just I know how to break these things down into infinitesimally small, tasks, things like that. But it just you inspired me about something else. And Mark, I see you've got your hand up. So one sec. But there's a balance point where you have I guess that more creative, I guess loose kind of reactive space, and then there's the super duper heavy planning space. Like I've seen project managers come into a job and the first 3 months is they're creating that work breakdown structure and they're creating a risk register and they're documenting all this stuff. They don't even know what the project really is yet or who they're dealing with yet. So they kind of swing a little too far onto the heavy duty planning side. So every team, every project that lives somewhere in the gray, right, in that third space, I guess, where you're kind of, there's different influences, but you can't swing too far to pure chaos and you can't swing too far to pure like process either. Mark, my friend, please unmute.
I was actually you took some of the thunder, but it's which is awesome. No, I think it kind of goes back to what I just said about the art versus art and science is the project management, and I'll call it a mindset or a framework. Both get overused, but for lack of a better way of using it, it's a way to frame your art. Right. It's putting it in a different context. Right. I've had a lot of artists in my life and see them go from one media to another and go, okay, they took themselves from one. I've got my ex-brother-in-law is a perfect example. He is a fine artist. He is a sculptor, but he also hand makes stirrups. Not stirrups. What do they call?
Saddles?
No, the on your shoe. Anyway, the spiky things on your shoe when you're a cowboy. I'm just blanked out.
Spurs.
Anyway, Spurs. There we go.
Blake's
Spurs.
in there too.
Thanks,
Spurs.
Thanks, Blake. Thank you. But no matter what media he is working in, he has the same expression. He is able to speak in each of those different sort of dialects, right? And I think from a project management perspective, we do the same thing. Is we have a bag of tools, right? We've got different methodologies, and we've got different, again, frameworks. You talked about a work breakdown structure, right? It could be facilitating a meeting with a formal workshop, right? These are frameworks that you're taking the creative pieces and putting them in an order that you can then make use of.
Hmm. Exactly. That's well articulated, truly. And it makes me think, like, even the work breakdown structure in itself, any artist knows the power of visualization, and that's seeing yourself at the end already, like in the full 5 senses, seeing yourself at the end of that breakdown structure, what you see, what you touch, what you smell, all of it. And so it's true, it's how you're framing it, it's how you're shifting and renewing yourself to use those tools to create another piece of art and another piece of art and another piece of art. Thank you for articulating it like that, Mark, truly.
By the way, as Kevin, as you were saying, don't do it through AI. I just, for grins, did I actually put into ChatGPT a quick status report, and it and this was me saying that I am over budget, behind schedule, my scope is out of control, but I'm still reporting all green.
That's great, but I knew it was AI generated because I had that M dash in there. That's the dead giveaway. But thanks, Mark. Good comments. I'm wondering, Morgan, kind of, we can pivot a little, because I wanted to ask a bit about other things in your background too. Your degree in international development, and I know your passion for gender, social justice issues as well. How has that helped shape kind of where you're going in this entrepreneurial / PM journey? Like, how is that kind of a North Star for you, or how does that impact, or how does that influence you?
Yeah. My education in international development, I loved it. Not many people have the gift of saying that they love their undergrad, but I would take that again, truly, any day. But that was a catalyst for everything I'm doing, 100%. Within my education, I had the opportunity of living in Ghana for an academic year. And then I had the opportunity of living in Bolivia for the next one. And both of those experiences brought so many things that I'm still learning and that are being revealed every single day. But one of the things that I came back with was I got to see third spaces in a different way. There was a different work-life balance in these communities where there was enjoyment and expansion, and joy felt in the simplest, in the most mundane of spaces. So if you think of parks or a barbershop or just a restaurant even, there was a gathering and a presence that North America doesn't necessarily nurture. It doesn't cherish. And that was one of the things that I was missing when I came back to Canada, to Kingston. And that was one of the catalysts for creating Third Spaces. And Third Space was because I was missing that, those spaces of enjoyment and full presence and oneness. And so going back to your question about international development, the theories that I was learning within international development is very similar to what is happening in Third Space. So I was studying these very interconnected, intersectional theories about economics, environment, political, social, spiritual realms from history, from colonial times until now. And so one of the main theories that I got to study was by Wallerstein. And so it's the world systems theory. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but it talks about basically what's known as the third world, which is what our new world order has been built off of. It's been built on exploitation. It's built on undervaluing what the global south, so what those spaces that give all of these raw materials that our world is built on. It looks at how it's been abused in the past, the power structures within that. So when creating Third Space, I had to really truly reflect on what thirdness means. The word thirdness comes with so much history and so many theories. And so third space, we are transforming that undervalued, overexploited term that is truly the necessity and the foundation of all life. And then we go back into space, and space in itself is a concept that's been political. We're intrinsically political like beings because the way we take up space is never just mundane.
Mhm.
Taking up space is revolutionary in many stories, in many cases, even today. And so the whole concept of just third space itself is based on theories that I've been learning throughout international development. And it's transforming that to work towards this sustainable community, to work towards this oneness again. Another one that comes up often is the circular economy. So I was studying a lot about how do we move forward to be an equitable society. And that requires joy. That requires love again. That requires spaces where people are free to express themselves in movement and in art. And circular economy goes back to how are we renewing these spaces, these third spaces, a cafe to be something else? How are we bringing in a common cause, a common good into these spaces that have been taken just for capitalist desires? And it's transforming them to be these spaces of gathering and celebration. So international development studies has really fueled my desire and my passion for creative social justice. And that's exactly what I feel third space is doing right now.
It's an amazing story to hear, about, especially your travels into Ghana and Bolivia. That's where you said, right? Just I mean, incredible, and to see that influence come back in trying to develop something new here. Because I agree. I mean, I have not traveled to those places in particular, but I've traveled, and I've certainly, when I come back, even some places like the UK,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's a community element there, like the local pub or something. You're like where everybody gathers there. That's just the space where there's weddings and funerals and like everything happens there. I don't find that the same here. In that, and it's like a corporation when everything is siloed.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard for folks to communicate and understand each other when there's that third space, that gathering point. It makes all that kind of disappears real quick. You're not conservative, you're not liberal, you're just the guy who lives down the street, and you want to talk about this today. Okay, like, and there's a lot more just freedom of discussion and sharing, I find, in that kind of environment.
Exactly, and so third space is a theory that was developed a while ago, and one of the case studies that talks about it is talking about during the Rwanda genocide. The third space was where people would come to settle disputes, would come for the common cause, the common good. And it was the place of peace in between. And it was again used in New Zealand with Indigenous tribes as well. And it was the gathering point where everybody came as one. And it was existing beyond differences, recognizing differences, so not necessarily being the same, but it's coming together with the differences in that one space, just as you said.
Yeah. No, I think it's fascinating to me to see you put the pieces together of how that environment and those lessons can be applied, I guess, through project management. Like it almost seems like kind of nuts that I've got this great international development experience and but it's so true. Like all of these lessons are so deeply applicable. PM writ large is about communication, and that seems to be the skill that is lacking in so many organizations. That's why all the trending or experts on LinkedIn or wherever are always talking about it's how important it is to be a project manager, and you're really selling this as a career or as a role. But there's a lack of that space, and PM kind of ultimately creates that third space. Like, how many times have I had to call a meeting between this faction of the organization and this faction of the organization just to come together and have a 10-minute chat about what we're going to do on the next project or whatever, right? Because they don't necessarily always think to do that on themselves. So it's very much a PM, to put a corporate brand on it. It's very much a PM mindset, as Mark kind of alluded to earlier, in terms of just getting people together and have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, I just saw you do come off of mute. Do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just real quickly, I just was better informing myself of Morgan's background, and I was glancing through some of your LinkedIn posts,
Mm-hmm.
and something just struck me, just as ironic here. You had commented that you appreciated someone providing a gender-based analysis framework.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it, and as a PM, I looked at it, and it is exactly the same as a Plan, Do, Check, Act, PDCA, for project management. I mean, it's not surprising, but it truly does go to show that you've already got an appreciation for having a framework to apply towards something that you're already working on.
Mm-hmm.
And just another way of doing it. I just thought that was, I'd share that. That was, there's a graphic on her post from about 11 months ago. And
Mm-hmm.
I looked at it, and it's a PDCA. And I was like, okay, it's great. So I applaud you for being able to bring both sides of your mind together, and be able to recognize when a framework, is applicable. So that was it.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'll jump in and remind, I know there's 10, 12 people still on the call. Anybody else? Comments, questions, please feel free. And Monique, you're just coming off of on screen. So, hey, how you doing?
I'm so well. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Please, what comment, question? How would you like to share today?
Yes, I just wanted to touch. I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation, by the way. And I just wanted to touch back on the concept of third spaces existing in the political sphere and existing, in all of these places, in Rwanda, in New Zealand, as a celebrated place of otherness. And Morgan, for you to be creating third spaces in Kingston, it's quite a radical thing to do. And somehow you create a space that allows all kinds of people from all genders, from all racial backgrounds, to feel included and celebrated, which is a huge feat. And so I wonder what the process looks like. It is probably different for each kind of event, but what does the process look like to create a space that truly feels like it belongs to everyone inside of it?
That's a good question. I will say, for everyone who doesn't know, Monique is my business partner with Third Space. Ask the right questions at the right time. And the thought process that goes behind making it inclusive goes back to remaining with your intention, remaining in alignment with the intention. And the intention for Third Space is for everyone. It's that space of oneness, as we've been saying. And so before every event, it's knowing that whoever is supposed to be there will be there. All that's in our control is cultivating the team that's there. So the artists that are there, selecting them, getting their story, and curating the space truly, setting the intention for it, and then knowing that all are welcome, and that we're not going after one person or one person or one person, but we're going after that experience, as we started with. That measure of success is through the experience. So allowing people to come as they are and leave even more as they are.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's exactly what it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the question, Monique. Again, we've got about 5-7 minutes left. So if anybody else has questions, comments, throw them in the chat. Even we can read them out, or feel free to unmute. Here's a question, Morgan. In
Yeah.
terms of third space / project management / everything, conflict.
Mm.
It's an unavoidable thing. Not that it
Mhm.
has to be a harsh conflict, but there's always going to be a disagreement of some sort.
It's true.
How have you learned? Maybe it's part of your education, maybe it's part of the PM things that you're learning now, but in terms of managing that kind of conflict, and what kind of example maybe have you dealt with third space where you've had to kind of work through something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and especially in project management. I feel as a person, I'm a very emotional person. So for me to react beyond emotion took a lot of work. It took a lot of inner reflection, and I think project management offered that space. The communication courses offered the space of, okay, how I lead shouldn't be by fully emotion, especially in times of conflict. And I'll give you an example. During one of our events, we had at least 80 attendees that had bought tickets previous, and then we had more sold at the door. And things were happening, technical difficulties were happening. And I had to take a moment. I was like, oh my goodness, I could respond very emotionally to the situation. And I acknowledge that I could definitely lose the intention, lose the alignment. And I think every conflict is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to see those blind spots. See, okay, what did I plan for? What did I not plan for? Where can I pivot? And every conflict, you have the chance to create. And I think that's something that comes up in everything I do, is that every moment, every response, you have the opportunity to react or to create. To react won't get you too far, but to create, you have the opportunity to make the situation calm, see what you have at your hands, what you have at your disposal, and then you get to enter it with a clearer mind. And so conflict is really just an opportunity to halt yourself for a second and say, this would be my impulse response, this would be my reaction, but I am actively, consciously, intentionally choosing to create a different outcome. Mm-hmm.
It's that kind of skill set that determines whether you're a leader or a boss. Right? I've seen many on either side of that, and I mean, again, you can read LinkedIn. Everyone's got like memes and jokes about this stuff all the time, but having that kind of wherewithal, which is not easy all the time, it's something I've had to cultivate. And I've got kids, right? So like, it's not always winning all the time, but it's something that you can, it is a skill you can work on, you can cultivate, you can improve at. But having to be able to, like, because I'm an emotional person too, and I know I'm just gonna come on, like that first thought is like, just do it already, right? But obviously you can't do that for various reasons. It's just gonna make things worse. So having that moment of, okay, and back to that North Star, back to that goal, back to which mountain are we heading towards?
Mm-hmm.
That should be guiding part of the reaction too, right? Like, yes, this is just where you've hit the swamp for a minute. We're still gonna get to our goal eventually.
Exactly. And I feel like some of those moments that we've deviated from what we thought was the mountaintop has revealed more than we could even imagine, and has brought us to connections that are necessary and that are needed. And so being calm in those moments, knowing like, okay, we pivot, we create an opportunity, but also know that wherever you deviate, maybe there's a connection that's waiting for you there. Maybe there's something on this side that you don't even know about yet. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. One more question for you, Morgan.
Yeah.
What's next for you? I know you're saying you're going into the next semester, project management, St. Lawrence College. But what's your kind of goal in the next year or so to kind of build up third space and then beyond? What's your focus?
Yeah, that's the question I'm asking myself very often right now. What's next for me is being more confident in the vision. It's leading more confidently, but also seeking mentorship, because I understand that as a creative with these different visions, I also need the business mentorship, because I do have these goals. I have a plan, and I'm making a more detailed plan. But I need to continue working on the skill set so that I can expand and fully actualize what I'm seeing in my mind. And it's happening, and it's working, and I hope it continues to work. But the plan for the next year is to stay rooted and to stay connected to that vision.
Fantastic. Well, I'm just seeing somebody has to drop off. We're just about at the top of the hour, so we'll wrap it there. But I want to say, Morgan, thank you so much. I want to say thanks for everybody for showing up and participating. It's been a lovely conversation. But Morgan, thanks for your time and all of your thoughts today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time, and your questions are so intentional, and I'll probably be reflecting on them for a very long time. So thank you for your time.